session that will be happening here is a poetry reading session by the Poetry Quarter Goa. I would like to introduce our speakers. They are Jugneeta Sudan, Omkar, Nayak, Alvares, Laveena, Tamana, Astri, and Bijon. I'd like to request them to begin this session without any further ado, so you may sit back and enjoy their poetry.
Alright, so this is a poetry quarter here, which meets once a month at the Latin Quarter of Goa. We meet in a cafe, the Urban Cafe. It's a very informal group, and we like to read out poems. Some of us write their own poems, whereas others, they bring poems, whichever poet that they're reading at that point of time. And they like the poem to be read aloud in the forum. Now, poetry is the heartbeat of literature, and however much you may do, it's always less. And so there have been many forums here at the festival where lots of poems were read out, and so we've added this right at the end, so that it sums up the festival on a very high note, on a poetic note. So when it's something that all of us feel here as a group, that the ploddingly pedestrian prose and the vertical lyric poetry. So poetry is something where we appreciate the sound, the pattern language, the verbal choreography, the ability of a line to leap from one point to the other without joining the dots on a page, the empty spaces in poetry, the gaps, which one of the poets said are like high voltage points. They're like a chemical compound where things happen. Those gaps derail you, and also they become points of enlightenment and illumination. Like Rilke said, it's news arriving out of silence all the time. And reading of poetry may not do something at that instant, but it changes the way you view the world, the way you inhabit your skin, maybe your pH value. So, how can we demand for a deeper alchemy than poetry? And this is the group which, we went through 3 sessions of poetry reading with Gail, and it was at the last session that we come together and we decided that we're going to continue meeting, and we are going to continue to recite poetry. And so then from then onwards, we meet at least once in 2 months, or we try and meet once in a month. And now there are, like I said, some of us write our own poems, whereas others bring poems written by other poets. And it's a collaborative encounter with poetry. So one of us reads out the poem aloud, and then we all comment on it, we analyze it, okay? We have our own opinions about the form, the content of the poem, and finally, when we've kind of threadbare and tackled it from all perspectives, the person who's brought the poem can say something. So that's how we go on with poetry. And another thing is, like the other day when Manoj Shetty, he was, he had come, he was as an invited guest to our forum, and he was reading out his poetry. He had a comment to make, and he said that poetry is never finished. It's just abandoned by the poet. And it's the reader who comes and completes the poem. So the interface between the poet and the reader is something that I believe in very much personally as a receiver of arts. And so I'm going to begin with a poem by Sid Corman, which is about the poet feeling so incomplete without the reader. Yes? It isn't for want of something to say, is the name of the poem. It isn't for want of something to say, something to tell you, something you should know, but to detain you, keep you from going, feeling myself here as long as you are, as long as you are. And when this first time that I read this poem, and I brought it to the forum also, it was like everyone perceived it as a love poem. Because it rings of love, it rings of want, it rings of companionship, it rings of that bond, yes. And when I read the commentary on the poem, it was about the poet, Sid Corman, as a poet who is asking his reader to be there. Because if the reader isn't, then the poem that he has created, or his created work, has no life, it has no meaning. So with this, I'll pass on the mic to everyone present here, and we'll have 3 rounds, and they all have 3 poems to read aloud.
So my name is Alvares, and the first poem I'd like to bring to the stage is Rivers in a Spoon. I am still as I watch waters drain from tributaries and join like veins of a newborn. I am still as I watch waters collect on edges, marking time as it drifts by, silent and still as my god of sloth, god of a microworld, god of a spoon, god of boredom and observation, one who rests on the 7th minute and says, "Just another minute!"
Hi everyone, I'm Tamanna. I will be reading a poem that I wrote. Most of my poems recently have been about exploring spaces and how we live in them. And this was while I was in a city, bigger than Goa. And I thought about how a lot of people feel that they are too alone there. And so this was one afternoon where I spent riding the trains up and down in Mumbai. Of walking a city alone is not true. Here are eyes, hands, as though the air itself brushing your arms to sweat, being watched like you gaze upon a bird in flight, in the unknown, in the sky, so that there is a distance between you and how far there is to go till you are a different person, perched on the edge of a seat, riding trains through the afternoon, no station, no sound that stops you, where you break into sunlight, where you breathe the taste of these other people, like dust settling inside your brain. You are unaware of the darkness, of a sweet, stale, heavy as perfume skin, this woman taking her body to the door. You fall in step with her shadow, fitting into her curves as she leaves them, like a solitude created from dust, from the corner street, taken home to pray in spaces that we live in. And at that junction, it is not true to talk of a loneliness at night.
I'm not a prolific writer of poems, but occasionally I write. Otherwise, I enjoy reading others' poems and also recite them. So what I'll do is that I'll start by reciting a poem by Carl Sandburg, one of the great American poets, and then later, the second round, I'll read one of my poems, and third round again, I'll go to another famous poems. It's called Chicago. Now, Chicago, as you know, is one of the notorious cities in the United States. And it became more notorious after they experimented with prohibition, and then the Al Capone and all other criminals, they had a big field day in Chicago. But the poet Carl Sandburg he moved into Chicago in the year 1912, before Prohibition. But even in those days, Chicago was not considered as one of the gentlest cities. It was one of the violent cities, and he tries to defend his Chicago compared with other soft cities like London, New York, Rome. And Chicago didn't have the finesse like New York or Boston. It was one of the rustic cities, but it was also the center of railroad connection in the United States. It was the hub of the railroads. So he tries to defend his Chicago and accepting all the things which are told against it, but still he defends it. Chicago, Carl Sandburg, hog butcher for the world, tool maker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads and the nation's freight handler, stormy, husky, brawling, city of big shoulders. Tell me you are wicked, and I believe them, for I have seen your painted women under gas lamps luring the farm boys. And they tell me you are crooked, and I answer, yes, it is true. I have seen gunmen kill and go free to kill again. They tell me you are brutal, and my reply is, on the faces of women and children, I have seen the marks of wanton hunger. And having answered so, I turn once more to those who sneer at this my city. I give them back the sneer and say to them, come, show me another city with lifted head, singing so proud to be alive and coarse and strong and cunning, flinging magnetic curses amid the toil of piling job on job. And here is a tall, bold slugger set vivid against the little soft cities. Fierce as dog, with tongue lapping for action, cunning as savage, pitted against the wilderness, bareheaded, shoveling, raking, planning, building, breaking, rebuilding. Under the smoke, dust all over his mouth, laughing with white teeth, under the terrible burden of destiny, laughing as the young man laughs, laughing even as the ignorant fighter laughs, who has never lost a battle, bragging and laughing that under his wrist the pulse, and under his ribs the heart of the people, laughing, laughing the stormy, husky, brawling laughter of youth, half naked, sweating, proud to be hog butcher, proud to be tool maker, proud to be stacker of wheat, player with railroads, and freight handler to the nation.
Hello everyone, my name is Laveena. In the month of October, there was one of our peers, Monica Gouet, who tragically passed away under very criminal circumstances. And we had the fortunate moment of meeting her at the workshop with Jeet the Eel 2 years ago. And I'd like to bring her poem called Jasmine Land to this forum, only to remember that we have poets that are with us and poets that are not with us. So may I, if I may, say this one. Jasmine Land, where little girls dream in the aura of mystery and the unknown, that heady, mesmerizing smell of living. Little flowers bloom, its bright, clean, and beautiful florency intoxicate the air. The hopes are high, and dreams are real. The web of memories and desires come together every morn in the fields of jasmine. As they bloom, they delight everyone with their charm and mystery. They live the life of giving. The pleasure of their existence is never theirs alone. In the land of jasmine, where little girls dream. A little bit about Monica. She was a photographer, a very national award-winning perfumer, as well as a poet. She was also the co-founder of a publishing agency as well. So, Sister Monica.
It's a bit hard to come to start reciting poetry after that. My name is Astri Ghosh. I'll be reading one of my poems about Goa, which is called Heading South. An orange moon is out. The sun hasn't set yet. Jim Morrison on the radio as we leave Panjim. A Brahmini kite soars above, heading for the south. Bambuli cross, offerings of marigold flowers. Lewis bows his head as we pass. Everyone honks here, he says, but I don't. Are you waking up the cross? Is the Son of God sleeping? And we drive past verdant fields, ducks in a pond, egrets, and herons in the paddy, coconut trees along the highway. A kingfisher perches on a telephone pole, the scent of cinnamon in the air. We cross the Zuari River and we're there, South Goa, Margao, village roads to Binolen, the beat, Sevnapati. Standing by the bar, watching Elvis Lobo play the meanest blues I've ever heard, his fingers speeding across his guitar. I wish Raz Gonzalez would pick up his saxophone and play.
Hello everyone, I'm Omkar. I'm going to read a poem by Ron Paget. He's an American poet. I recently happened to see this film called Patterson, which is a recent film by Jim Jarmusch. And it is about a poet living in the city of Patterson, New Jersey. Yeah, so the movie is titled Patterson, and it's about a poet in the city of Patterson in New Jersey, USA. So, this is the poem. When you are a child, you learn there are three dimensions: height, width, and depth, like a shoebox. Then later you hear there's a fourth dimension: time. Then some say there can be 5, 6, 7. I knock off work, have a beer at the bar. I look down at the glass and feel glad. I go through trillions of molecules and move aside to make way for me. But on both sides, trillions more stay where they are.
So the next poem is basically one I had written a long time back, and it's kind of dear to me because it talks about my experiences, through meeting various people through various media or whatever. And this is called, the name of it is The Chat 2.0. A father away from his family, a son who's lost his glory, off to a mother who wishes she had worn a rubber, a meeting without a face, a talk without a voice. Each cry tears to quench the other's fears. They are strangers, quite frankly, but for that instant, they are family.
So this next poem was actually a conversation with someone else, but strangely enough, the poem is titled To Tell Yourself. Not just now. I cannot hold your heart anymore. I cannot hold my own hand. And it is troubling me, the way my fingers don't fit themselves, and I have been trying all day today. And just now, when I thought it feels right, I noticed I did not know how my skin felt to myself. And that is why I have to let the sea fill the spaces between our eyes, and that will be the only way to hide you. And to learn to love myself with my own hands, and to hold my own heart, to love myself more.
This is one of my own poems. This is called A Sea Dies of Thirst. This was inspired by another poem, very famous poem, by the Palestinian national poet called Mahmoud Darwish. And he had written a poem called A River Dies of Thirst. But that poem had political overtones. But this one is more purely environmental concerns. Now, this is about Aral Sea. Aral Sea, as you know, is an inland sea. It was in the former Soviet Union. And two of its republics, one is the Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, they had two rivers called Amu Darya and Sir Darya. They used to feed this sea. But what happens is that they had also desert areas and they wanted to irrigate this and show that under the Soviet regime, how people can conquer nature. So the water was diverted from both these rivers. And when these rivers which are feeding the sea, they're diverted, what happens? The river dries up. And you will find, if you go to the internet, you will find many of the pictures of the desert, and in the middle of the desert, old boats and ships are there. So I have written this, and I have introduced the idea that how the things were before and how it has happened today. And there I have also introduced that the sea is the kingdom of Neptune. Neptune is the god of sea. So what happened to Neptune? Neptune was ruling the sea with his weapon. The weapon is a trident. And what happened to his trident and what happened to him when the sea dried up? A sea dies of thirst. A vast blue sea, heaven its nurse, two sibling rivers, Amu Darya and Sir Darya, flow tirelessly, ceaselessly, eternally. Bring fresh waters of distant mountains, paint its shores lush and verdant. Sea waters sing songs to resonate life. Boats and ships catch fish, carry goods, ferry people on Neptune's azure kingdom. Hijack the rivers, kidnap their waters, orders the human. Make them slaves, make them work in our deserts. Like genie's magic, our dry deserts will now yield rice and cotton, fruit and vegetables. Then the blue sea's waters begin to recede. Shores shrink, seabeds surface, seabirds disappear. The desert monster comes to claim the last few drops of water. Neptune vanishes, no time to bid farewell. Inglorious was thus the demise of the blue sea, died of suffocation, perished in thirst. Half buried in the sand lie carcasses of boats, ships, anchors, and a massive rusted trident. Whose trident is it? Will steal it to recycle its steel, proclaims the human, now riding on a camel. Time to claim the honor and the glory of trying to heal this blue, ailing planet.
This poem is called Solas. It was inspired by a friend who went through a really heartbreak, but still wanted to believe in love and trust that things were going to work out for her anyway. And she was very keen on making it a tattoo. Now I know we don't normally print in ink on skin, but this was one of the cases where I got a chance to write her a little verse, and so this is dedicated to Danielle. Solas. The last leaf falls, not for glory. It trusts the tree to express its seasons and fulfill its life story.
Since we talk about seas and trees, I'll also do an environmental poem. My poem is also Donna Pollering. It's called Sunrise at Pangani Beach. As I walk on Wangili Beach, the stench of sewage at sunrise, black sand and a nasty smell between two fancy hotels. The stench of sewage at sunrise, you can't walk there some days, between two fancy hotels. Joggers on the strand. You can't walk there some days, black sand and a nasty smell. Joggers on the strand as I walk on Wangili Beach.
So my final poem is it's kind of a fascination, I would say, to, well, she spoke about heartbreak, but my question was, my fascination when I wrote this poem was, when you are betrayed, what's the madness that goes into your head? I mean, what drives you, and who do you direct it to? And that's why this is called Lover's Roulette. Give her your gun and a bullet, and an opportunity along with it. Take care of that bewitching mistress, whose moan satisfies her lover's needs, or the one who promised her till death do we part, and didn't realize that she took it to heart. Perhaps for all her suffering, she deserves it, for even a mad dog deserves pity. The choice has been made with a gunshot, only to find your blood flowing hot. Your last breath is all you have left to tell, the greeting words of welcome to hell.
Before I start the last poem, I just want to say that as a group, whenever we meet, this often happens where we have a poem and then someone else comes up with another one, unplanned entirely, which is very converse to what we just discussed. Or sometimes it's exactly the same. And I think even this session was about poetry that we didn't discuss what we were going to bring forward to the stage. But it's very reflective of each of our styles or the kinds of things we sort of deviate towards every time. And so as I started out, my first poem was my fascination with spaces. The last one is titled Spaces May Seduce You. And just to say, just outside the session, Astri told me that poetry is about bearing your soul and being naked on the stage. And this was a poem which is a collective understanding from myself and from a lot of people that I know of. Spaces may seduce you. Tonight, I will have a conversation with the hollow spaces inside of me. Learn to give, I will say, till you create a tired sleep, a whole swallow, heart heavy enough to sense out of body. I will give you tenderness, and you will become a storm ocean, a solemn dance. Temper my sadness, expand, rough over the vacant hardness, settle into a tangent, a song, a savage breathlessness, consume what fires you find. I will hear my voice echo, disjointed into limb and lung. Softly I whisper, gather into blood, and I will imagine that I can cut you out, open mouths into my skin, and then I will hear you speak. Outside of a space, a hollow is vast. It is familiar, alone, and to understand, tonight the hollow spaces inside will converse with me.
The next poem I'm going to read is called The Convergence of the Twain. It's a very famous poem by Thomas Hardy. You know, the Titanic sank more than 100 years ago. And many poems have been written in many different languages. And I have read quite a lot of them, but I like this one very much. It is by the English poet Thomas Hardy. And here, I mean, the angles are different. Different poems have got different angles or different perspectives. Here, he has personified the ship, the Titanic, and also the iceberg, the two people, two mates who are going to meet together. And here, Titanic it shows that a beautiful ship, which also represents vanity and pride, and she is getting prepared. And on the other side, another iceberg, as the Titanic is being built, the iceberg is also being built. And they will meet together, they will converse together. This sinister mate, ultimately when they meet together, it will be a mating of disaster, destruction. So it has got some kind of sexual connotation at the end, consummation, but it is one of the most beautiful poems on the Titanic. The Convergence of the Twain by Thomas Hardy. In a solitude of the sea, deep from human vanity, and the pride of life that planned her, still couches she. Still chambers laid the pyres of her salamandrine fires, cold currents thread turn to rhythmic tidal lyres. Over the mirrors meant to glass the opulent, the sea worm crawls, grotesque, slimed, dumb, indifferent. Jewels in her joy designed to ravish the sensuous mind lie lightless, all their sparkles bleared, black and blind. Dim moon-eyed fishes near gaze at the gilded gear and query, what does this vaingloriousness down here? Well, while she was fashioning this creature of cleaving wing, the immanent will that stirs and urges everything, prepared a sinister mate for her so gaily great, a shape of ice for time and far dissociate. And as the smart ship grew in stature, grace and hue, in shadowy silent distance grew the iceberg too. Alien they seemed to be, no mortal eye could see the intimate welding of their later history. On sign that they were bent by paths coincident, on being anon twin halves of one august event, till the spinner of the years said now, and each one hears a consummation comes and jars two hemispheres.
The poem I'm going to read is a rant on the state of the world today. It's called Born, Dream, War, Songs. And it really is about the youth and how the existential life that we have right now is just we're born, we have dreams that never get fulfilled, we have wars with ourselves and wars with others, and then at the end of the day, we have songs at funerals. And if this is the state of what we're going to give the future generation, well, let's see. What a waste of creation, taking its time to form, to evolve, only to endure transmogrification, for mediocre use, abused by the insatiable ego, like a pig who wears a pearl, yet ignorant of the mysterious magical mollusk in which it was born. What a waste of potential, to give up on dreams before any are realized. Fairy tales, adventures, devoid of joyful, victorious endings. It is the fate of dreams that are shelved away with childhood, the ones they said were impossible to occur, the ones you dared not dream. What a waste of language if it fails to refresh a humid mind, when words oppress spirits, their powers trapped like a genie in a lamp. Woe to the misunderstood, their intent, meaning, like earnest patriots, die for a nincompoop ruler lost at war. What a waste of possibilities to mourn for creased petals, their sentimental values sunk in an ocean of the pragmatic now. Why not mine this moment of truth and regain the promise of a new day, a cynic world, and join in the chorus of cherished love songs?
The last poem that I'm reading is not about Goa or Dona Paula. It's about something that happened 32 years ago in Delhi. It's called 3 Days in November. The day after she died, crowds poured into the city, burning scooter rickshaws, taxis, and trucks. The day after she died, I saw 15 cars that melted in the asphalt in just 1 hour. And as the flames rose from shops and homes, a cloud of smoke and ashes stifled us for 3 days. Some people opened their homes, gave shelter. Others said they deserved what they got. 3,000 murdered to avenge her death. The earth trembles when a big tree falls.